Yo, what up my glib globs? Back in the beginner's video, I've promised you more advanced driving tips once the channel hits 4-digit subscriber numbers. And now here we are, all thanks to your support. So I sat down to create this guide with 5 more tips guiding you into the more sophisticated techniques to move quickly in rally driving. But first, let me point out where I expect the entry level for this. You should be able to keep the car on the road, complete rally stages with minor damages, and have a grasp to hear and understand your co-pilot. If you are still struggling, the content of this video will not really help you yet, and more practice might be advised. These tips are all intended to make you faster. Therefore, to finish more quickly, you first have to be able to finish consistently. With that out of the way, here's the overview of what I'll cover. I've put those tips that make most sense for wheel and pedal setups at the end of the list, to not waste the time of pad or keyboard pilots. Although I'd recommend again to get a wheel. If this is a remotely committed hobby of yours, it will greatly increase the feeling. So, now for advanced driving tip number 1, deceleration. I didn't call this braking for a reason. There are more ways to slow a car down than the brake pedal. But first, the theory. Almost all cars are slower in gaining speed than in losing speed. So to make an overall drive quicker, there can be more time gained in the acceleration part than in the braking, if you manage to make the phases of acceleration longer and the top speeds higher. To do this, you want to exit out of corners on the throttle as early as possible. Now, a common mistake is to brake very late for a corner and just barely getting around it. Chances are you are past the apex and still braking in that case, wasting acceleration space. So, first of all, you should always try to brake early enough to maximize the exit speed. The slower and more controlled you enter the turn, the better and earlier you can accelerate out of it again. It also has the added bonus to offer more wiggle room for mistakes, making you less prone for serious crashes. Another braking tip I want to give a side note here is the so-called left foot braking, which is when you nudge the front of the car into the corner while also accelerating. But I find it very intuitive to understand and to pick up in virtual driving. It's more difficult to adapt to real driving in my opinion. So now, there are still more options to improve your slowdown, which is using more physics. The environment can be utilized to slow you down and assist in braking, which shortens your brake distance even more. The most obvious case for this is Sweden, where you can dip into the snowbanks on the side of the road to slow you down quite effectively. But also consider the road surface itself. When on tarmac, you might have learned to brake in a straight line for maximum grip, but on gravel this turns around. When you are slightly sideways under braking, the wheels will push up soil and dirt, spewing it all over the place. The energy to do this is taken from your car's inertia, and so it slows you down. The less grip the surface offers, the more useful a sideways braking becomes. But a word of warning too, this is quite an unstable position for the car's weight transfer, and spinning becomes a risk for the unpracticed. Finally, the differences on the road itself can be read to find more milliseconds in braking. For example, in Monte Carlo, you want to brake on the black stuff wherever possible and not on the ice. Or for New Zealand, you might utilize some big puddles for braking in wet conditions, but prepare for the unequal inertia induced by that. To summarize the deceleration, try to not brake at the last minute, but instead aim for best exit positioning. Utilize left foot braking for mid-corner corrections, and utilize as much of the environment to help you slow down more efficiently. Advanced tip number 2, corner linking. This one is about creating a better mind map from your co-pilot calls. A common problem that might slow you down is if you are tackling the stage one corner at a time. If you are just driving a certain corner, let's say a left 4, and then you skip to the next node in your mind, while you are already in the corner, bad things can happen. Because what if the next one is a into right 2? What will happen is that you come out of the 4 on the far right of the road with quite some speed. And now you immediately want to swing into the right 2, but you are on the wrong side of entry, which means that you have to slow down more than necessary to catch the right 2 without a crash. But if there is a long straight behind the 2, optimizing the 2 is much more important than the 4 to maximize your overall speeds, just as I described in the previous tip. The aim in this example would be to hug the inside of the 4, losing some exit speed there, but coming into the 2 from the left on the ideal line to be on full throttle for its apex. To be able to do this, you have to link up a chain of corners and adjust your mind road constantly. Try to think at least 2 corners ahead and always see a corner complex as a complete issue and not as separates. Every new copilot call might potentially change your intended line for the previous corner as well. This is especially true for into or sudden immediate callouts. This linking of corners can gain quite some time. Sacrifice the optimal lines for some corners to gain the optimal exits on those where it really matters. Now for advanced tip number 3, the Scandinavian Flick. The most famous rally driving technique, also known as a pendulum turn. This actually gets taught in driving school in some Nordic nations, as it is quite useful when driving in heavy snow. It goes as follows. You are approaching a corner from the wrong side. While braking towards it, you actually turn the wheel away from it as if you want to jump over the cliff edge. The weight of the car will shift. You will slide, and this will already help braking as described before. Now, once you actually enter the corner, you suddenly turn hard to the other direction and start to accelerate. This will swing the back around quite hard and enter a significant drift into the turn. At that point, the actual flick is over and you drift through the turn as usual, pointing in the exit direction and throttling as hard as soon as possible. So, what's it good for, you might ask? You could achieve similar things with the handbrake turn as well, but not quite. Look, the difference is in the deceleration again. Once you flick, you are already slowed down and can throttle through the turn. If you do that with a handbrake turn, the actual swinging with the handbrake would slow you down more. Another thing happening is that you use stored inertia. When starting to slide in the wrong direction, energy gets built up in your springs and the distance that the mass of the car will shift around is increased. This way you are able to initiate steep drifts without using too much braking. And at least for my personal driving style, this is also the best use case for a Scandinavian Flick. Fast corners that benefit from a steep slide angle. Whenever the corner is too shallow, it is wasted effort and can be driven racing line. Whenever it is too tight, you might be better off going with a handbrake turn, or just a normal brake-initiated slide, as you have to slow down hard anyway. But all those in between, where you don't have to slow down a lot, and need the steep slide angle anyway, those are excellent cases for Scandinavian flicking. Advanced tip number 4, clutch kicking. Well, technically still possible on keyboard and controller. I assume this is now most useful for those with actual pedals. Clutch kicking means exactly what it says. suddenly kicking the clutch for a short moment and releasing it again. You do this while not lifting off the throttle, so the effect is a sudden increase in engine rev as the engine disconnects from the drivetrain. When letting it slip in again, this sudden rev increase will most often lead to a break of traction and spinning of the driven wheels. I do this in two different use cases. The first is a desire to spin the wheels when they actually don't want to spin. For example, when you are in a tight turn on tarmac and are understeering off towards the roadside. If you have a rear-wheel drive car, you can suddenly break into a drift when doing a clutch kick, which can potentially rescue the collar. The other, more common case is to work around turbo lag. Some of the older vehicles have quite large turbo lags and only a narrow rev range where the engine actually generates the desired power. One notorious example, and probably my most hated car, is the Group B Peugeot. If you slightly misshifted or misjudged the corner speed, this car just falls into the turbo lag hole of doom and has little power left. A clutch kick placed right brings up the rev again, spools up the turbine and moves the car forward again. In the Group B case, often with such violence that new problems arise immediately. So, both cases are fixing driving mistakes. If you are a perfect driver, you might need little to no clutch kick. But it can be a very useful tool to limit the time damage a slight mistake might cost. Instead of losing a second, you might only lose 200 milliseconds whenever rescuing situations with this technique. And finally, advanced tip number 5. Heel and toe downshifts. When you drive a manual car, there are 3 pedals to be handled with just 2 feet. When you now drive this car at the limit, you might want to learn to heel toe to operate all 3 pedals at the same time. Why would you need that? It all comes down to matching the rev of the transmission to the rev of the engine. When braking hard into a turn and then changing gear down, it happens that you engage the clutch again at a time where the current gear expects a high revving engine. But coming from a higher gear, your rev will not be there, and just falling into the clutch will lead to a hard punch from the car's transmission. Reason being that the transmission side of the clutch has started to spin much faster when you selected the lower gear, but the engine is not at that speed yet and has to rapidly rev up when the clutch drags it with it. Now, you might actually never really felt the effect in virtual racing very strongly, but try doing it in a real vehicle and you'll feel the hard punch when shifting down at high revs. It doesn't look like a strong thing, which is why it's hard to see the forces in virtual driving, but this punch unsettles your car's balance and induces inertia. Now, especially when braking while turning at the same time, this can push the vehicle into unstable conditions, make it harder to balance, and sometimes even spin it out. To prevent this, you wanna match the engine's rev roughly to the level where the transmission is spinning as well. This means a slight blip to the gas while the gear is disengaged. And since you are most times braking when wanting to do this, you need to continue braking as well. So, step by step how I do it. Start to brake, using just the front of your right foot. Now, press the clutch with your left foot. In this moment, simultaneously move the gear lever to the new position and blip the throttle pedal with your right foot without leaving the brake pedal. This is where all 3 pedals are operated at the same time, and also where the heel-toe name comes from. Although I used to do the blip with the side of my foot rather than the actual heel. Once the rev is up, release the gas and clutch pedal again. Now you are still braking, all while having changed the gear without inducing a punch into the transmission. This is mostly about practice, coordination, and finding a comfortable way to move your feet. The benefit in time is admittedly not huge, but it prevents some unstable conditions. And it is very good practice for real-world driving, as it will be much more gentle to your transmission parts when you drive a car at its limit. This would be it for today. All of these tips require a learning and a practice phase, but they will make you a quicker driver once implemented. One more technique, especially for rallying, is jumping fast and safe. But that I'll explain soon, when the country guide for Finland is done. Keep an eye out here to catch that as well. Until then, I wish you much improvement. You might also like to take a look at these videos. See you soon. Cheers.